Thank you for being here. This is our second episode together. So we'll just start with, why do any of these practices? Why do any spiritual practice?
Yeah. Um, I was just thinking about, our last conversation, and we spoke about that there is this underlying restlessness that we have. And as human beings, we are born to do things, like we express ourselves. We want to feel happy. We want community. We want to feel loved. And so we are on this search in some ways to find happiness. I think that what makes us all human, and that something that we share with other people,
Yeah.
and so everyone expresses that differently, based on where they're from, where they're at in their lives. We all want to provide for our families, and so we do all of these things. But at the same time, we also realize that we have resistance towards life in some ways, and it shows up in
Mm.
relationships, it shows up at the workplace, um, and we try to solve for it, right? We try to, uh, in the beginning, escape from it. So we watch movies, we go, we watch TV shows, we get addicted to different things, food and substances, and that is also a learning process. And so at some point we do come to realize that there is something within us that we can look at, and we take on different practices which are also largely cultural. So in the West, therapy is a big uh, part of mental well-being, right? And so there's, uh, in the East, you could say, naturally there is a more sort of yogic and meditative sort of practices that are often spoken about, but not necessarily, everyone has access to. And so everyone has to kind of figure that out for themselves as to what they connect with.
Right.
Yeah, and so yeah, to answer your question, like we do things because we can't help ourselves. Like we are human beings, and we need to do something. And I at some point we get lucky, where we start to do things that actually solve the problem rather
Mm.
than escape from the problem.
Mm.
And that luck, maybe we can call grace or good fortune, or there's different ways to describe it. But yeah, at some
Would
point there's
you,
a
would
shift.
you, sorry, but would you call that karma in some ways?
I suppose,
Because
yeah.
you always hear that in the yogic circle sometimes, that if you pick up a book that is transformative, it's your karma.
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of confusion around that term, so I was
Yeah.
just curious. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the definition of karma is action, right? So everything that we are doing in some ways is karma. So every action, including a mental action as well. So like if I think about something, that is also karma. And we can't escape karma. So there is this other word which is called dharma, which means the nature or the essence of something. And according to yoga, the dharma of the body is to act. And so as long as we are living in this body, we are going to act. So be it sitting and doing nothing, or being in the world and solving large problems, or however we are expressing ourselves. So so no matter what, we can't escape that. So the
Mm.
body will act. So then the question becomes, why do we do the things that we do? Like, and so if we actually look at our experience, the thoughts that we have, the actions that we do, uh, they start to they tend to happen because of our past experiences. So you can say that the past actions that we have done, and the accumulation of all of our experiences, result in the present mind and the present mind will have those thoughts and want to do those actions based on how we experienced the past. And so things that gave us a lot of joy, we want to do those things again. Things that gave us a lot of misery, we want to avoid those things, right? So there's this
Right.
eternal search, or I guess the pattern of wanting to do things that I think will give me happiness and wanting to avoid things that will give me suffering. That's how the mind is set up. And so it becomes really important to find the things that give you happiness, that are actually going to reduce our dependence on things, and is going to give us insight into our inner workings of our own mind. So that way we are truly becoming free from external dependency on happiness. And it is grace when that happens. And you can say, yes, it is karma as well. Like, if we do have an encounter with somebody who happens to be doing a practice, and we get inspired by that, and we start to have a conversation with them and learn about that practice and apply it in our own lives, then yes, all of that was triggered by that one meeting. And then that one meeting, you can say, was triggered by bunch of previous actions that one might have taken. Maybe you read something in a book, or maybe you watched a video online, and so you knew what this person was talking about, right? Like, there's all these different threads in the past that lead to this moment where, oh wow, this moment has a significant impact on whether you do something or not.
Yeah, I really like how you said spiritual practice addresses the restlessness that most of us experience, and then we seek externally to resolve that restlessness, not realizing it's that restlessness that is making us seek for those experiences. So from my own experience, I can say that it's the spiritual practices that got me to notice the restlessness that eventually turns into some type of emotion. And it's those emotions that I was able to get in touch with. Like, why is this coming up when this person says something to me, or when I'm about to eat something? Like, where are these emotions coming from? And I don't know why, like, the restlessness transforms. And sometimes the restlessness, I feel like it can show up as boredom too. Right? And then you feel like you need to feel stimulated for
Yeah.
doing something or watching something. So I guess the greatest awareness is probably from this practice is that this restlessness exists within us. And once we are able to use these practices to look a little bit deeper into those restlessness, I feel like we start to learn a lot about ourselves, our patterns. And for me, it's been not just like in relationships, but I would say even the way I eat, how I eat, it's all connected. I've noticed.
I would say, like, like, the definition of relationship is also interesting, right? Like, we certainly relate to people. Like, when we talk about relationships, we think of like two people and one person relating to the other person. But I think relationship is just how we are looking at something else. So it could be a person, it could be an object, it could be an idea in our own head, it could be an emotion, it could be like all these subtle, like gross and subtle aspects of how we perceive this world. And so you're totally right that how we relate to food is also something to look at, right? And some of our addictions, or rather addictive tendencies, tend to show up in these different parts of our life. And certainly we might be addicted to maybe a person, but we are sometimes also addicted to maybe a certain kind of a food, or maybe a certain dietary pattern, right? So yeah, I think yogic practices, a lot of it is just about getting aware. And so how do we become more sensitive and increase our sensitivity to life,
Mhm.
and through that process we can start to like look at how we relate to things, what kinds of thoughts are we having, what kinds of emotions are we having, right? Like I think I love the fact that you said it's important to look at emotions, because underneath those emotions is the restlessness that is driving the emotion. um, and I read this really nice definition of emotion, which I totally agree with now, which is that an emotion is nothing but a sensation on the body and a thought about it.
Mm,
Um, and so every time, let's say, we experience fear, actually what we might be experiencing is like some sort of like a sensation that doesn't feel good on the body. And then there's a thought about that sensation that's trying to describe the sensation. And so we say, okay, this sensation might be happening because I am afraid of what I am seeing. And so then we, together with the thought and the sensation, we describe this thing called fear. And we do
mm,
that with pretty much every other sensation as well, or every other emotion, where thoughts come in and we try to describe that sensation plus that experience as guilt or shame or anger, right? But while we are experiencing it, I don't think we really have the feeling of naming it, right? It's only after the fact that we reflect and say, oh yeah, kind of when we get a step away from it, that's when we think of it as like fear or anger. But like when we're in it, it just feels like we're just experiencing some intense feeling, I suppose.
mm. So I have a question on that. Emotional release has been something I've been playing with. I would say the past 2 to 3
Hmm.
years. So when I got into yoga, one thing that really drew me to the practice was that yoga wasn't just talking about the mind. So when I went to the Buddhist teachings, most of at least the center that I was going to was a Kadampa Buddhist center in Safety Harbor. They were very much sharing the psychology of the mind, how we are conditioned uh, by
Hmm.
our circumstances and how we grew up and how those narratives and patterns keep repeating over and over and how we're unconscious of it. Um, but interesting thing about yoga is that I learned to utilize my body to, and perhaps that exists in Buddhism also. I don't know enough about all the sects of Buddhism to say how it is or how it isn't. But the one I was introduced to, which was beautiful because I didn't even know these things, that I could observe my thoughts. That was like unheard of the way I grew up.
Mm.
But then when I got into
Yeah.
yoga, I loved how just being in child's pose, for example, I was able to like release some level of emotion. What if I felt like I was carrying some weight in my chest? Just being in a child's pose and breathing, I was able to release that. And that's
Hmm.
my personal experience, right? And that's one of the reasons I gravitated towards yoga, because it taught me to use the body also as part of the spiritual practice. I really resonate with what you shared, that that definition of emotion, that it's that sensation in our body followed by perhaps a thought. Um, for
Hmm.
me, it's noticing that sensation was through yoga. Now, can we do that
Yeah.
just simply by sitting in meditation? Of course, but I think yoga just gave me that pathway to start doing more of that. How do you feel about that? About
Yeah.
the
Um,
physical part of the yoga
yeah, totally.
practice?
That totally makes sense to me because all of the undigested experience of the past, which we, in the modern world call as trauma, is stored in the body, right? And that trauma is unconscious, because what gets stored in the body we generally are not very conscious about unless it shows up as an unpleasant sensation. And so a lot of practices is to become more attentive to the body, because we can then start to notice the underlying restlessness and the underlying
Mm.
sensation that may not be present. And a lot of somatic practices are trying to release uh, the trapped energy in like the different parts of the body. And so yoga is certainly one of those practices that does that. We become more aware and of the body, and we're able to um, hold the body in like three-dimensional space, and all these different cool things that tend to happen when we start doing yoga, where we start
Mm.
paying attention to the body. And one of the things that yoga does say is, there is no difference between body and mind, um, because it's one unit, and that differentiation is a very psychological thing, right? It's a concept. The fact is that it's just this one unit that's operating in union. And for communication, we would like to maybe talk about, oh, there is this mind and then there's this body, which is separate, but actually it's not. So if we pay attention to the body, it's essentially paying attention to parts of the mind. um,
Mhm.
and and the other thing about trauma, which and the release of emotion, what you were talking about, is everything that is stored in the body is trying to be felt. So all we really have to do is allow it to come up and really just feel it. And the intelligence of the body is such that it will dissolve, and it will pass. But when we were kids, and maybe when we were emotionally immature, we didn't have the capacity to digest a difficult experience, be it if it was at school, or it was like something at home, or an adult was like yelling at you. Just that energy of that experience was, uh, we just didn't know how to handle it. And so
Mm.
that ends up being stored as something in the body. It gets stuck somewhere. And as we become older, we start, if we haven't resolved it, like the same energy is in operation unconsciously, and then that ends up in different situations where we feel angry and annoyed or fearful, whatever that experience was when we were younger. That same energy is in operation in the now. And so like somatic practices like yoga will allow you to release some of that, and we might feel the exact same emotion that we were feeling when we were younger. And we just need to have the courage and the patience to be with it. And I think a lot of yoga and meditation and other practices are allowing us to have that courage to be able to face that difficult, icky sensation, and be
Mm.
with it, and just being with it long enough, with love, with kindness. And I'm not saying we need to hard knuckle and try to
Mhm.
fight that feeling, but just with a it's almost like I have a bunch of friends and nephews who are small kids, and when I see them uh, not get what they want and they feel sad and angry, like our initial response is to hug them, right? To say, oh, it's
Yeah.
okay, you're fine, it'll be fine, like you hurt yourself, it's okay. And then a few moments later they do change, and they're happy again. And so we need to do the exact same thing to ourselves in the moments when we are feeling discomfort, when we are feeling icky. We have to give that inner child a hug, because that is what is coming up,
Mm.
that unresolved energy of that past experience. And so a lot of
Right.
my practice has been, to allow that to come up, and then shower that feeling with love, which I didn't receive in that moment when that experience was happening.
Mm. I love that, Puneet. I think we're all sort of raising ourselves through the spiritual practice in many ways to, really evolve into the way I like to call it, like the fullest version of ourselves, right?
Hmm.
Because I always look at, if it's like a relationship with a person, nobody really wants to yell at anyone, right? Most
Hmm.
people don't
Yeah.
really want to yell at their partner. They don't really want to yell at their parents or their kids.
Right.
So, but it's those unhealed parts of us that triggers us, and we end up doing it, and then either we beat ourselves up for doing it, or we find excuses for ourselves because they did this, is why I am responding or reacting this way. They made me do it. So we
Right.
have like those two extremes we sort of deal with after the child in us ends up reacting.
Yeah.
So for me, that awareness has been really helpful also, to know that the more those parts are healed, the easier it gets to navigate
Mm.
certain triggers.
Yeah. So I think, the first question that you asked of like, why do we do this? I think it is to get to this place, which is that the world is still going to operate in ways which are not ideal. You might still encounter people who might yell at you, right? But the fact that you have now maybe healed from the past um, traumas and like the past experiences where that yelling in the present doesn't have the baggage of the past to influence your
Mm.
response. And so our response to whatever is happening is clean, untarnished, and can be appropriate to the situation. It could be that you might yell back too, but you're not yelling back from a place of trying to resist a past transgression. It's essentially based on what is your most intelligent response in this present moment.
Mm.
And I think that completely gives us confidence and the ability to like trust our actions and responses in the now. And at least for me, I think it's realizing that I don't need to operate from recipes anymore. There's no, yeah, in the past, I used to think about frameworks. This is a good framework to operate from, um, psychological frameworks. But now it's like, I have the intelligence to meet the world in the now and see, and respond. Like, why
Mm.
should I think about a particular way to respond or like think about recipes, right? I think what will happen will be what needs to happen.
Kind of like this podcast we're doing, right? We don't like prepare so greatly like the day before. We just kind of show up and just be in the
Yeah.
now and then have this chat.
and
So
and it's
have
spontaneous and more fun that way, right? Like there's less
I agree.
pressure.
I
There's
agree.
you're not thinking so much.
100%. And like I said, the conversations with you for me is also more of a session. That's the way I look at
Mm.
it, because I always leave with something that I never thought of before, or you just reaffirm something that I know deep down is also the truth for me.
And likewise, like I think these
Mhm.
conversations have to be a meeting, right? And it's like we are both talking and we are both sharing and we are both learning. And it's when and something is either confirmed because we're talking, in the now, we're trying to understand and talk about our own experiences. And so there is this immediate meeting and there's an immediate learning. And that, I think, in the end is meditation, which is, we are also looking at the mind and having this sort of dialogue with our own mind, and we're trying to meet, and in that meeting there is some insight that comes about, and you're like, oh yes, this is how I looked at that situation, and this is why I got annoyed, or this is why I acted in that particular way, because there is this insight that happens of like, maybe there was this unresolved situation in the past that
Mhm.
came in, and in the moment, like my parents said something and it reminded me of like something they said like when I was a small child, and I hate this part about what they say, and so there is this immediate insight into, oh wow, I'm still holding on to something from the past. um,
Agree. And how do we release those emotions constructively, right?
mhm,
And for something I tried, this was like 2 years ago, is primal screaming. I don't know if you've heard of
That
that.
sounds cool. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll share a little bit about that. So 2 to 3 years ago, I was kind of feeling some things in my body, and I just wasn't feeling right. Right, like something just felt like I woke up in like a different person's body. So one of my friends recommended this practice where you go and there's like a method to it, but what you do is you scream pretty much on top of your lungs. Like you really scream, you let it all out.
Hmm.
And I did that. It was like a 45-minute session, I would say.
Wow. Are you screaming for
It,
45 minutes?
so it's not constantly you do it and then you take a break and then you
Okay.
do it again and then you take a break and then you sort of notice. So it's not the whole time you're not doing it. There was like a method to that practice. But after it was over, you feel like, or I felt like I was cleansed,
Hmm.
because how often do we take the time to just let it all out?
Hmm.
Right, some people, like, go to boxing classes and they're like, I feel so great after, because you just, whatever was in you just came out, right?
Right.
And I think introverts can probably relate to this more than extroverts, because extroverts do tend to um, process it externally, from my understanding. But introverts tend to process a lot of things inside. And if the processing is not done in a more conscious manner, it gets stuck. And then you're just kind of like walking around with this weight in your chest.
Hmm.
So for me, I would, if I must label myself, I would just say I probably lean towards introverted
Hmm.
side of personality. So for me, that was like, this is so great. It just reminded me of so many different practices out there, and to find one that aligns with each personality type to be able to
Right.
release.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds really interesting because it's essentially a catharsis sort of practice, right? Like there is this pent up energy, or like you said, processing, which means that something is unprocessed, right? Like something needs to clear out. And so yeah, so I think like this is like there's a lot of, like, I haven't like delved a lot into it, but there's energetic practices like shaking, and like gibberish speaking as well, which I think sounds similar to like the screaming part, where you're just kind of like just doing things to like allow the energy in your body to like express itself. I remember like this Osho had like dynamic meditation, and he designed it in such a way which was like 4 different parts. And so I think the first part is this sort of vigorous shaking, and then the next part is dancing. So after like the energy has been excited in some ways by shaking it, then you creatively express it by dancing for 15 minutes, and each of them is, I think, 15-minute for. And then the third one is meditation. So you're sitting after dancing and expressing, you feel like you're done something in a creative manner, and so your body is now at peace, so the meditation can be effective. And then the last piece is kind of lying down and experiencing this death-like feeling. Yeah, and so there's all these.
Mm.
I'm not an expert in energy practices, but I sense that, yes, for especially for people who have a lot of blockages, that this might be a directly targeting that piece, which is like, I'm unable to express myself in some way, and I want to release that.
Mm.
But it is also true that every practice will lead to this, which is, we do have all of the traumatic sensations that come up on the body are nothing but these energy blocks, these past experiences that have caused the psychological part of us to be a little twisted in some ways. And so like that, paying attention to it through meditation is essentially releasing that blockage as well. So I think we
Mm.
all start from different parts of the mountain, and then we do end up at the same place. which is a body that's fully free, psychologically is not like having any fears, and can meet the moment without any sort of resistance. And I think coming back to the first question, which is why do we do this, I think everyone needs to maybe think about like what is the goal of the spiritual path or whatever you're doing in life for self-development or like psychological healing. Like it would be a lot faster if we can understand the goal and what do we want to get out of it. Some people I know, especially in some of these energetic practices, can go in a very different direction, which is you can get certain psychological powers of maybe like reading people's minds, and of course those are all woo-woo things that do tend to
may I
happen. Yeah,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
that is a question I have. So
Yeah.
so these siddhis, like I've heard about that in Yoga Sutras talk about it, and a lot of people in yoga also talk about it. So like these siddhis are the superpowers, I guess, psychological powers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in all honesty, I don't know any yogi yet. I don't know if you do, but like I don't know anyone that has those type of powers to levitate and read other people's
Mm-hmm. I
minds.
certainly cannot let it. Yes.
Okay. I mean, I don't, even with you, I'm like, I don't know him enough. Maybe he can. I don't know. Right? But yeah, so I'm curious on your thoughts
Yeah.
on that topic.
I mean, firstly, yeah, a lot of it is like the lore, which is some sort of legend that we might have heard in or read in a book, and we get really excited about it, and then we think we want that, like most things that make us want to feel special, and so we are like, okay, I want to pursue that thing. So that's one, which is we are getting seduced by an idea, right? And we are trying to essentially dream. We are going back into the dreaming process of trying to acquire these psychological powers. And the one thing that most spiritual practices that actually work will always bring you back to like what are facts. Um, our mind, our senses, those are facts. Like this world that we are seeing is a fact. What we are seeing and how we interpret it is an idea, but the fact that we are seeing colors, the fact that I'm hearing a sound, the fact that I'm feeling a sensation, all of those things are true. And we try to use the mind to get away from that, and we get lost in the mind. And so a lot of spiritual practices is essentially bringing us back to the fact. Yoga of asana is bringing us into the body, so we are staying in touch with the actual sensations and feeling of the body, which is happening in the now. But then the mind wants to escape from that and maybe start thinking about, oh, am I gaining siddhis, am I like developing like superpowers? And not to say that that may not happen, it certainly is recorded by many people. And as we start to deepen our own practices, we do see like significant changes in the way we experience the world. But that is not part of like or rather that is not the goal of the practice. The goal, in my opinion, everybody can have their own goals, but in my opinion, the goal of the awakening process is the complete end of suffering. Which means, I love how Buddha described it in the form of like first darts and second darts. I don't know if you know this analogy. And I love it because it totally explains how we experience the world, which is the world is going to throw first darts at us. We're going to experience things that we don't like. We're going to experience outcomes that are different from what we want. We're going to experience relationships where people are behaving differently than we would like them to. and we're not going to get many things that we deeply want. That is the first dart that this world is going to throw at us. And we cannot change that.
Right.
And then what happens when we do get thrown a first dart is that our mind starts to complain and resist the first dart, thinking that we wanted that outcome. I wanted that promotion at that job. I wanted my partner to say she loves me, and she didn't in the way that I would like her to, right? Like all these things that happen, I fight what is not. And so that's the second dart. And that happens in the field of the mind. Um,
Mm.
and in the field of facts is where the first dart is. And the first dart cannot be something we can change. Like we have no control over that because it is what the world is doing. But the second dart is completely in our control. And if we can clearly see the separation between the first dart and the second dart, we have, I would say, reduced suffering by like 95%. And then the last 5% is really going into like, what is the mechanisms in which the second dart gets created? And once we start to see that, it just falls away really fast. So
Mm.
the underlying restlessness that we spoke about is because of this, the first dart and second dart in operation, which is the second dart is the cause of the restlessness, this underlying
Mm.
restlessness that I want the world to be different than what it is. And I'm trying to mentally and psychically change the external world. I want people to behave differently. I want my job to be slightly different. I want my boss to treat me differently. I want my friends to love me more. All these different things that we may want as human beings. Psychically, we are trying to push against what is actually happening. And that is the underlying restlessness. If we can clearly see that that's an impossible thing to do, like we are never going to be able to make that happen. It's like trying to push the ocean away and say, no, stay out there, do not come in.
Mhm.
I just want the waves to freeze for, it's like doing it's exactly like doing that. So once we start to notice the ways in which we push against this world, then we can start to like reduce that restlessness. And then, and maybe along that path there may be some mental uh, superpowers, I suppose, can come about. But that is, at least in my tradition, what I have seen and heard and had some taste of myself, is dependent on practice. So it's like playing the guitar and getting really good at playing the guitar. Like you can do that, you can be really good at playing the guitar, but that doesn't really that has nothing to do with the second darts, which is where most of the problem is. You can get really good at levitating, or maybe really good at communicating with trees, but that's not where our suffering is, right? Those are in two
Right.
complete fields of this work. We can focus on it, but it has nothing to do with actually solving the core of the human problem, which is, how do I come out of my suffering? How do I stop throwing second
Mhm.
darts at myself?
I do like how you said there are recorded observations of people, just people who have acquired some level of superpower that's not considered normal for an average person. One of the stories that come up in my mind is how, I think it was a Buddhist monk, and he was protesting, and I don't know if
Self-immolation, I think, is that
he,
what you're talking about?
yeah, I don't know if
Yeah.
he did it. Yeah, he and he was just sitting there in a meditative posture and
Yeah.
not
There's a
screaming like
video of that.
someone normally would, right?
Yeah.
And that goes back to, Jesus on the cross, like, right? I don't know how he may have experienced it because there's no video, but I can see how you could train your mind so much to be one with the divine, um, transcend even the body suffering to an extent where
Mhm.
you can even sit still for that kind of pain. So that's
Mhm.
that's actually pretty interesting to me.
And a
And
lot of it is also like, we as lay people, like, that person who self-immolated was a monk, right? Like they had a completely different world and a lifestyle where they can be very, very disciplined about, like, the things that they're doing day to day. But we as people who are in the world, we need to be able to be in the world and be okay with it, right? Like that is the ultimate siddhi. So there's something called, you said the word siddhi, which essentially is a superpower or psychological power, but there's something called a mahasiddhi, which means the great power, or the great siddhi. um,
Mm.
and the great siddhi, according to the definition, is freedom, where you can be in the world and not be affected by it, which is the second darts have ended. um, and because the second darts have ended, now the ability to be with the first darts is also increased greatly. And so, the monk who
Mm.
self-immolated, was the first dart was their body was on fire, which is certainly a very painful first dart. But it is possible to then, increase the capacity to be with that first dart too. um,
Mm.
and that is an endless pursuit in some ways. And maybe there is a part where you can completely cut off your physical senses from the world and be detached. But then at some point you are going to come back. You can't be in that state for your entire life. You got to eat, you got to poop, or maybe you just die at that point,
Right.
and which is what that monk may have done. But we have a body, so until we have a body, we must act. And back to the first question, which is everybody
Yeah.
acts.
Yeah. I just wanted to touch upon the parable that you shared of the Buddha. That's such a beautiful, um, I guess, parable that you shared, because it really reflects in many things that's happened in my life. So when my parents got into that terrible accident, so it happened. So the way I heard that story, it's the two arrow story. The first arrow is the actual incident, like something
Mm-hmm.
that actually occurred, which was my parents' accident. The second story is, why did this happen? The second arrow is,
Mm.
why did this happen to me? Could I have done something different? Um, why? Why did it happen? Why did it have to happen to both of them at the same time? Like all these questions and narratives that come with it. Am I a terrible daughter
Right.
for not being in India for like until they were able to come back? This is when they were vacationing in India, is when the
Mm.
accident happened. But so like all these stories that come up, right? Same thing with my divorce. So the divorce happens. First arrow, second arrow is like, why is this happening to me? What could have I done differently? And then like repeating the stories over and over in your head for like a
Mm.
year, and then 2 years go by and you're still asking the same questions.
Right.
So that's like the second arrow,
Mm.
right? The suffering that we cause ourselves. Now it's okay to reflect and say, what could have I done differently? But this repeated stories that keep playing over
Yeah.
and over, that causes so much suffering, is what helped me, on
Mm.
this path, like to find inner
Yep.
peace and not pay attention to
Yeah, I mean, I
that.
love that distinction, which is like, is it happening compulsively, or are you consciously reflecting? Right.
Mm,
I think the most of humanity's suffering is this compulsive need to do things, and we just can't help ourselves. We just are, especially the mind chattering and the mind creation of different thoughts. Like it just becomes this habit, and we think that there's no way out, and there is a way out, and that is what the spiritual path is. um, and yeah, not to say that you don't want to really think about, okay, could I have maybe planned this trip in a different way so that doesn't happen again in the future. Like that's the sort of learning
mm,
that we can do consciously, but not from a place of fear and shame and guilt or whatever the feeling is that's happening when it's happening in a compulsive way. uh, yeah.
yeah. Do you have a spiritual practice at the moment that is different from the previous years? Or has it been, I know you've shared a little bit about your journey where you did go into different paths, learning
Yeah.
about different modalities, but like right now, are you doing something new, or is it, do you have like a structured practice? or is it more like you've come to a place where you don't need to necessarily have those tools, or structured practice like in the morning, and in the evening?
Yeah, I mean, I think the structure isn't as rigid as it was in the past. Like in the past, I would be like, this is meditation time, so I need to meditate from this time to that time. Like that's no longer true right now. And I don't have a full-time job right now, so I have like a lot more space. So my practice is just being awake in the waking state is the meditation practice. It's just whenever things that come up that make me realize that I'm relating to it in a way that is resisting it, that is sort of uh, a reflection that, oh, there's something happening here. There's some belief or something in operation which I may need to look at. Yeah, so I think my practice has changed from like closed eye meditation to open-eyed being in the world and seeing whether I am feeling comfortable in this world. And if I'm feeling uncomfortable in any way, like why? And is that a second dart or is that just a first dart?
Mm.
This is an insight practice. So like, we're getting insight into the workings of our mind and insight into the beliefs that we're holding. Uh, and yeah, that has worked really well for me. And I don't know if it's something that everyone can relate to, but it certainly like has helped me a lot. And I have a mind which is which likes to figure things out. So I think if you're a kind of a personality which likes to know how things work or has an overthinking mind, it's definitely helpful for that kind of a mind, where my teacher describes it as it's a non-intellectual path for intellectuals.
Right.
um,
Yeah. So there's a confusion out there about Buddhist teaching and Zen yoga teachings, that you're not supposed to have any desire. And I think that's like saying, okay, you can't have a desire to breathe. I mean, that,
right.
like as a human, that's not possible, right? To have a desire not to breathe means you want to die. That's a desire still. End of the day. So what I've understood desire, or that concept of letting of desire, is letting of the desire to a specific outcome, right? Like,
Yeah.
so if you're choosing to dance on the stage, it's not so much about, are you going to look beautiful and graceful? No, you're just there to fully be in the flow and dance your heart out,
Mm-hmm.
basically, right? And not worry about how anyone is going to look at your performance and give you some kind of rating. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I love that. It's
But
it's
you,
it's an expression. Like we are creative beings and we want to express ourselves, but most of the time we get caught up with society and all these other things which confuse like our original motivation of like, why did we want to do this in the first place? It's because we have this inner energy and creativity that needs to be expressed, and we want to dance, we want to sing, we want to work with people, and we want to experience the joy of connection and all of that. And so if we can get in touch with that, then like our actions become more wholesome and like more fully aligned with both mind, body, spirit, energy, everything, right? And life becomes easier. Like there's no, even if we don't get what we want, it still becomes easy because the joy comes from the doing rather than like what happens after the doing. um,
yes, yeah.
and you can like you can have a desire to want to get better, right? Like you're learning and you're doing something new and you want to do more and you want to get better and you want to do it in a bigger stage and a bigger, all of that is totally fine, and like there's joy in that too. And then so I don't think, yeah, like you said, like we don't want to live a miserly life in many ways, where we want to give up things and think that that's what renunciation is. Renunciation is giving up the outcome and not the action. And so we can still go through with the action, and it doesn't matter what happens, but we still try and hope that we get what we want, because there's also joy in getting what we want, as we have all experienced. We do feel extreme joy when we get what we want,
And that's fleeting also, right?
and that's
But the
fleeting
joy
too.
of, right?
But
The
the
joy
joy,
of doing is fun.
the amazing part is like the joy that we experience is the same joy. Like there's only one joy that we experience, and we just experience it in different ways through different experiences. By meditating, by doing spiritual practices too, we experience the same joy. We also experience the same joy by fulfilling desires, because there is only the joy of the self, the joy that comes from within, and we use the world to experience that joy. And so there is the indirect experience of joy through experiences, and there is the direct experience of joy through like getting in touch with the inner self and the inner being. So both can happen. And so once we see that there is nothing, I have been seeking myself this entire time, once we clearly see that, and then that dependence on the world drops, and then the expression can truly be without expectation, without fear, without any sort of strings that are holding us down. It can be a full involvement with the world. It isn't some high state of being in the mountains undisturbed, right? It's like being in the world and seeing the world for what it is, which is, it's just a bunch of images and colors and thoughts. It isn't like that concrete that we give it way too much. We give it more weight than it deserves in some ways, and giving that extra weight causes us to suffer.
So it's almost like the spiritual practice is becoming aware of, or it helps you become aware of the restlessness and transition it to a state of openness, would you say?
Yeah, it's like getting perception of restlessness is step one, that, oh wow, I am restless. And then step two might be, what is my contribution to this restlessness? Is it just there? Is it because the world is burning? Is that why I'm feeling restless? Because a lot of that might happen, right? Like, wow, we are going through all these political situations, so of course I'm going to feel restless. Half the world is currently like fighting with each other. Of course I'm going to read all of that and feel restless, right? So then we can justify restlessness to some degree and say, yes, there is I'm right in feeling restless. So that might be step two. Then step three is like, oh my God, the restlessness just goes on. Like there's no end, right? And so
Right.
then there's that learning of like, okay, like this just can't be it, right? There has to be some way out. And so that's the step three of like, okay, what is my contribution towards this restlessness? How am I adding to this restlessness? And so then then the first dart and the second dart might make more sense. Because in the beginning, I think the first and the second dart might just be like, darts are coming through. I have no idea whether I'm doing this or the world is doing this to me, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, and so spiritual practice is like right in the middle, where you have some certainty that, okay, I might not be the only one throwing darts here, right? There might be some darts which are out of my control, and I might be reacting to that. And is there a way to stop?
Right.
Okay, so we're going to end this conversation with a short meditation. This is one of my favorite meditations because it really puts me in touch with my experience of this world. And hopefully by the end of this meditation, you will experience that too, and you might have a different perspective on how you are experiencing this world. Okay, let's begin. So start by sitting in a comfortable position. I'm currently sitting in my chair, and I can feel the sensations of the backrest and the chair on my back, and then the quads and thighs of my legs. I'm going to start by taking a few deep breaths, just getting more settled into my body. whatever thoughts that I might be thinking about, I'm just going to put it on the shelf for now. So for the next few minutes, we're just going to try to put as much attention into this current moment experience. So as you continue to take deep breaths, just start to notice that you're currently conscious and alive. There's this awareness of sound, certainly. You're hearing my voice. You might also be hearing other sounds around you. If you have your eyes closed, your visual field might be dark, but you're still noticing and you're still aware of darkness. If your eyes are open, you might be aware of the things in front of you. There might be a subtle smell that you might be experiencing. Or maybe there's no smell. You can also be aware of a lack of a smell. You can notice that there might be no taste as well. Maybe you might be chewing gum, so you might be tasting the gum. Or if you're just had a snack before this, you might have the remnants of that. So just notice all the different senses are painting this current moment for you and me as well. The five senses are like pipes. There's information that's flowing through them, and it's flowing right into this canvas that's creating this current experience for us. And while that's happening, there is this other part of us, which is the mind and thought creation process, which might be happening. You might be thinking about something that happened, or you might be thinking about something you might want to do after this. Just notice all of that. That is the entirety of our experience. There's nothing outside of that. In this moment, sounds, the vision, the smell, the taste, the touch, and thoughts. You might also notice that we really have no control over what these five senses are feeding us. There's no way to not hear a sound. The sound is just being heard. You don't have to do anything, make any effort to hear a sound. It just is heard. You don't have to make any effort for your eyes to perceive darkness or the screen in front of you. It's all happening automatically. You might notice the thoughts that you might have also seem to happen automatically. You can't consciously think about something, but there is some thought that is happening automatically, and that's okay. The senses are providing lots of information. The mind will process it, will try to make sense of it, and that shows up as thoughts. So the entire sense and thought mechanism does not, a lot of it does not need any additional energy from you. So you can relax and settle into this watching of it all happen spontaneously. It's like you're sitting on a bank and watching the river flow. This river are your five senses and the thoughts about them. Effortless observation. If there's a thought that causes a bit of distress, it's okay. You can breathe in and let it go. Don't have to get involved in the story of a thought. This meditation is trying to make you notice that there is a part of you that is untouched by what the five senses are showing you and what the thoughts are also showing you. It's like you're sitting on the bank and you are untouched by the water. Now, you can choose to jump in the water and get wet, but there's always a choice of coming back onto the bank again. It's like getting lost in the thinking or in the story. So then you've jumped into the water. But once you see that, you can then easily get back into the place on the bank. And the water and the thoughts and the information from the senses flowing without any effort, without your involvement. All you can do is notice it. You can have judgments and opinions about what you're seeing, but those judgments and opinions are again just thoughts that can be put back into the river, and they go away. Don't have to hold on to your opinions and thoughts too seriously. This posture of looking at your current experience provides a little freedom, a little space. to respond with intention and respond in a way that might be more effective. So notice that it is very easy to come back to this place on the bank of the river whenever you find yourself lost in thinking, when you're interacting in the world. There's always this option of coming back to the bank. So use this, get rooted in this, and see what happens. Okay, now we are slowly gonna bring our attention back to this world by opening our eyes if you had them closed. And with our eyes open, you can also feel that there is this potentiality of sitting on the bank and being in this world. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone.